Well, hello there, and thank you for joining us for Atheist Talk. I'm Eric Jane, your host today, and with me is a atheist that we're going to better know. Today's topic of conversation is going to be get to know an atheist. So we're going to get to know a local atheist here. His name is Bob Alberti. Thank you for joining us today, Bob.
It's a pleasure.
Bob Alberti is the creator of the world's first commercial multi-user interactive role-playing service, GameBit Multisystems, which featured the game Scepter of Goth. In 1991, he co-authored the first internet search and hyperlink tool, Internet Gopher, the predecessor to the World Wide Web. He is the author of the 2-volume Mitlanul, which describes in detail the religions of Tekkamul, the world of Professor M.A.R. Barker, and we're going to get more information about that as the show progresses. Presently, he is an atheist in residence at the First Universalist Church in Minneapolis, where he is part of a video opposing the Marriage Prohibition Amendment, and I saw some of that video today. It's on YouTube. How might viewers be able to see that video? Is there a keyword search you can go to on that?
You certainly could search for First Universalist Church in YouTube. And they have a channel, and it would be the first video in the channel. So
okay.
They're trying to get that video in circulation, which is part of why I'm here today, is to sort of get the word out about this particular effort to oppose the Marriage Prohibition Amendment.
Excellent, excellent. So, Bob, in this series of getting to know you, local atheist here in Minnesota, I think we're going to start off by asking your upbringing. Were you born and raised in Minnesota?
So I'm an adoptee. I was born in Massachusetts and adopted there, raised in Queens, New York, till I was 8, then New Jersey till I was 13. Finally, we came out here to Minnesota, which is where my mother was from, and I've been here in Minnesota ever since. So 35 years in Minnesota, or as they called it when Norm Coleman was running for office, a carpetbagger.
All right, well, so you've acclimated yourself very well to the Minnesota winters and stuff like that after being here for 35 years.
No, I'm very depressed by this winter. It was I'm pretty sure the Vikings management took over operations of the winter weather, and this is what we got this year.
Yeah.
So, yep.
So in the home that you were brought up then, were you brought up in a Christian faith?
Catholic.
Catholic,
yeah,
okay.
Very firm Catholic family. Yep.
I see. So you did the communion and
confirmation and the whole 9 yards. My marriage was my last sacrament in the Catholic Church, and in fact, at that point, my fiance/spouse and I had already stumbled into the Universalist Church in Minneapolis, and so we kind of knew that was our last hurrah. But that was kind of for the families as much as anything else.
Oh, sure. Okay, so she
was raised in a Polish Catholic family here in the Twin Cities. So
two Catholics.
Very Catholic, a lot of Polish. My grandmother was Polish, really, very straight Catholic upbringing. I went to Catholic school for the first 3 years of school.
Okay.
My first grade teacher was Sister Maureen Judge, and she threatened to hang me from the ceiling from my thumbs.
Wow.
So, yeah.
So that was kindergarten, first, second, and third. First, second, and third grade?
First, second, and third. Yeah, I was in third grade when I decided to do an experiment on displacement and decided to stuff paper towels in the bathroom sinks and then leave the taps running. And so Sister Maureen Judge came and singled me out and figured out who'd done it and said, I will hang you from the ceiling by your thumbs.
Wow, how are your thumbs doing these days?
They avoid nuns now.
They avoid nuns, all right.
Nuns, yes.
Excellent. So that was the first few years of your life then,
yes.
and had you stuck then with the Catholic Church, even though you weren't going to the school? But
it came to catechism here in Minnesota now, and I was forced to sit and think about religion weekly for several hours while people were talking around me about other things. I was completely not a Catholic at that point, although I didn't know what I was. And I decided that, and this is when I was about 13 to about 16, that progression, I decided it wasn't enough to be a not Catholic. I couldn't not believe a religion. What I needed to understand was what I actually did believe. And so what I did was I sat and I didn't know it at the time, but I was using scientific method. I said, okay. I said, if there were a right religion, you would think that over time their followers would increase because, you know, you pray to Baal, and Baal's not the God, and you get run over, but you pray to Set, and Set is the God, and you get saved. And so after a while, there would be an increase of that right religion's followers.
Sure.
And so I said, okay, the right religion would result in longer lifespans, improved standard of living, better general health, etc., etc. And the only thing that fit those criteria, which I finally realized, was not a religion at all, but was science. If you look at science and the scientific method, it is since the introduction of scientific method during the 17th or 18th centuries, whenever you want to say science really got its feet, you know, on the ground, that what did we have? We have improved lifespan, you know, increased lifespan, increased population. Malthus predicted we would all starve to death because we couldn't raise food. Well, science comes along and improves crop yields, etc., etc. So it was the scientific method that said to me, no, this is the answer to your hypothesis. It's not God's. It's thinking about the world and getting it right for a change.
Sure, okay. So it wasn't a switch to some other sort of spiritual spirit out there who created the universe. It was just science.
Well, okay. So my take on it, and this kind of dovetails into why I'm a Unitarian Universalist, is I call myself, half-jokingly, a spiritual atheist. And what I don't mean by that is I don't believe that there is some mystical ghost who controls or, you know, influences my life. What I do mean by that is that we don't know everything, and it's still possible to stand with a sense of wonder and look at a sunset. Even though we know a sunset is light refracted through the atmosphere and bouncing off dust particles from volcanic eruptions, it's still awesome. And so that's what I mean by a spiritual atheist. And actually there's a song, probably everyone has heard of it who'd be watching this show. It'd be Peter Meyer's Holy Now. And if you've never seen or listened to Holy Now, go to Google, Yahoo, or YouTube, Peter Meyer, Holy Now, and listen to that song. And it talks about how when we're younger, we think about things in terms of mysticism and religion. As we get older, we learn the facts behind it, but it becomes no less wondrous.
So that was Holy Now?
Holy Now by Peter Meyer.
Peter Meyer. Okay, I am someone who hasn't heard that song, so I will definitely check that out.
Yeah, it's a wonderful song.
So yeah, the whole idea that you can be spiritual and find great wonder in to borrow a title from Richard Dawkins in The Magic of Reality,
yep,
is I share that spirituality with you. I think most atheists probably would also.
One I heard recently, and this just blows me away, is that astronomers are getting a look at more distant galaxies than their telescopes can actually resolve, because collections of galaxies bend space into a lens, which they are then using as a lens to see galaxies farther beyond. That's pure science, and that's rocking my world. You know, that's awesome.
Right, that is very awesome. That's a very good description, too. I like the way you explained that. So then you had mentioned then that you are a universalist.
Yep.
And a universalist then is somebody who you just described then is somebody who can be spiritual and find spirituality in just reality.
Well, Unitarian Universalism is a religion. It is not a religion with a creed. It is a religion with a set of principles. So you don't have to believe in a God or a particular set of beliefs, but you have to hold certain values. And those values are inclusiveness, tolerance, what is called a respect for the interdependent web of all life. There's 7 principles, and I should have them memorized, but I don't. But basically what Unitarian Universalism is in a nutshell, or in an elevator speech, is it's the understanding that we're all seeking the truth. We're all starting from different places, seeking a common center. So we're all coming together, which is what religion is. Religion is reuniting. And so that's the idea behind Unitarian Universalism, is that we have you pagans, we have you Christians, we have you Jews, we have you atheists, and you agnostics.
You being
Unitarian Universalism.
Unitarian.
Oh, I mean, we got 47 syllables in our name. We got to shorten it.
Sure.
And so the Unitarian Church is, from the 19th century, these two philosophies came together in the 1960s to form one religion. The Unitarians believed that there was only one Godhead, right? There was not a Trinity. There was not Jesus and God and the Holy Spirit. There was just one thing. Universalism believes that God would not create the universe and people in order to condemn them to hell, so that everyone is universally saved. And so what I like to say is Unitarianism means there's one God I don't believe in, and Universalism means there's just one afterlife I don't believe in. It greatly simplifies things.
Sure, yeah. Do you think that most of the people in your church, first of all, how many people are in the church? How many is in your congregation?
First Universalist Church in Minneapolis on DuPont Avenue in Uptown is about 1,000 people strong. It's one of the largest Unitarian Universalist congregations in the country, possibly in the world. We also have a number of other congregations around town, including Minnetonka, First Unitarian Society on Mount Curve, by where the old Guthrie used to be, much more secular than First Universalist, and probably a lot more appealing to a lot of atheists. White Bear, St. Paul, there's a number of congregations around the Twin Cities.
I see, okay. And there's 1,000 in your particular church.
That's right.
Do they have church services on Sunday mornings?
Church services on Sunday mornings, 2 services. There's a lot that challenges an atheist like me, and I'll admit it. For example, there's a wonderful solstice celebration. All right. Well, I'm cool with celebrating the solstice because it's an astrophysical reality. The Earth is the days are going to get longer. Good with that. Right. But when we celebrate the service, we stand and we face the 4 directions and we close the circle and all that. And, I nod and smile and go through the motions. I don't believe that there are spirits in the 4 directions or that there is a magic circle, but my colleagues do, my neighbors do in the church. And so out of respect for them, I go through that. Out of respect for me, they respect my beliefs and they try to, ease up on the God talk at times and be inclusive of the beliefs of atheists and agnostics.
It sounds like a marriage, a little give and take.
A little give and take, that's right.
Sure,
Yep.
Okay. There's nothing wrong with that then. So 1,000 in the church, and it does sound like there's a lot of people in your church then who do believe a lot of different spiritual or mythical kinds of things.
Yes.
Is that the majority, you think, of the people?
I would say the majority, yeah.
Okay.
There's a much more secular humanist edge to Mount Curve. So if you try First Universalist and you find it's a little too goddish, a little too God-talky, give Mount Curve a try. See if that's closer to your tastes.
And what are the demographics like in your church?
Oh, we're a bunch of upper middle class white folk.
Okay.
We really need a stronger representation from minorities and from different economic strata, but I think part of it is the placement where we are right in Uptown.
Oh, yeah.
So yeah, it is very, very white. Yep.
Okay. Now we did bring up a little bit about your past and being brought up in the Catholic Church. You said that when you were about 13, 14, 15, 16, thereabouts is when you stopped believing that, and,
Right.
and then you got into science. And how did your family take it? Did your family know? Did your parents know? Did your mom know?
No, it was only after our wedding, when our children were born, that we made it clear to our parents we weren't going to be raising them Catholic.
Oh, okay.
And fortunately for me, my mother is a character and a half. But she does have a streak of inclusiveness in her, and so she was familiar with Unitarian Universalists from her time in Massachusetts, and which is where UUism has sort of its core. So she was familiar with the faith. She wasn't thrilled by it. My wife's family was even less thrilled by it, and in fact, as a result of that and other things, we're not actually in communication with my wife's family anymore.
Oh.
But we had to stick to our own beliefs, and this is very important to us.
Sure. So that is a consequence that I have heard from many atheists who have come out to their families, that sometimes relationships are jeopardized.
Right.
And it sounds
And
like
it was only a factor. You know, there were many other factors that led to that, but yeah, it is reality. Yep.
so now your children, how many children do you have?
I have twins who are juniors in college, and a younger boy who is a junior in high school.
Okay.
So my son is in River Falls, my daughter is at the University of Minnesota, and my youngest son's at South High.
And they are good, godless children?
Oh yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Religion is not a strong part of who they are, but they did go through the religious education program at First Universalist, which is a phenomenal religious education program, and they came out, I think, very focused and clear-headed people for that.
That sounds really interesting. Is that like a comparative religions class?
It is a comparative religions. In fact, they take the youth to various mosques, Buddhist temples, Catholic churches, Jewish synagogues. They take them everywhere. They let them talk to the clergy and talk to the people, and by and large, with a spirit of free inquiry, many of them come out atheists.
Sure, yeah. That sounds really fascinating.
And it also has something called OWLS, Our Whole Life Sexuality, which is age 13, a full year of sex education, clear-headed, taught by a straight person and a gay person and maybe a third person, with very clear instruction about sexual issues. It's a wonderful, wonderful religious education program.
Is that part of the general youth group then, or
it's
something?
It's part of the First Universalist religious education process, and that in turn is part of the Unitarian Universalist Association sort of recommended processes.
I see.
So it's a really great program.
Huh, you got me thinking about my own children.
Yeah.
And that would be something.
We have a lot of people who join just to put their kids through that process, and, welcome. I mean, if all you're doing is giving your kids a comparative religious education and some really good sex ed, come on.
Huh.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, if I join, I wouldn't be able to help you out with the diversity since I'm white and my children
Yeah,
are
no,
white, so.
exactly. See, you've messed it up. Our plans are...
We did mention about your books, and I want to talk a little bit about that. I'm just going to flip over here my page to make sure. You had coached me a little bit before we went on air about the pronunciation, so I'm going to attempt this again. The name of the book, and is it 2 books?
It's 2-volume set.
2-volume set, okay. Is Mitlanyal.
Mitlanyal.
And why don't you just go ahead and explain a little bit about what Mitlanyal is?
So I'll start with a really quick history lesson. Minneapolis, St. Paul is the home of role-playing games, which is not well known. But Dave Arneson and Gary Gygax, who created Dungeons & Dragons, they were part of the University of Minnesota Wargaming Club at the U of M in the early 70s. Along with them was Professor M.A.R. Barker, who was a professor at the university. He was a professor of South and Southeast Asian Studies. He's also the man who wrote the Klamath language book of the Northwest Native Americans. Well, that role-playing group, from that, Arneson and Gygax went off and they formed TSR, and they published Dungeons & Dragons. And the very next game they published after D&D was Professor Barker's Empire of the Petal Throne, which is set on his world of Tecumseh, a fantasy world that he's made up since he was 10 years old. Wow. As a very, very skilled genius-level linguist, it has its own languages. It has 100,000 years of history. It has a culture which is a pantheon, which is best described as a kind of mix between Aztec and East Indian cultures. So it has 20 gods. The reason I wrote Mitlanyal, which means all the good gods, or all the noble gods, in the language of Tecumseh, is that the very first thing you do when you create a character, if you're going to play this game, is you pick your religion. With 20 gods and a bewildering set of what they stand for, everybody looks and they go, war god, and they all join the war god, and they pick up a sword and they go fight monsters. And so I wanted to lay out a little more clearly for a new player what all the different gods were. And hence, with 20 gods, you end up with 2 books. It ends up being a gigantic task. It took me 10 years, but we finally did get it published in about 2005.
How long did it take you?
About 10 or 12 years to write this. Tecumseh has been published in several incarnations continuously since the 70s. So there was 30 years of magazine articles and internet discussions and published game rules that had to be researched in order to collect all of the different religions, lay out their different philosophies in an accurate and concise manner. So
wow,
it's a lot of work.
Yeah, that sounds like an awful lot of work.
And I thought as an atheist, I was well suited to do this because I wasn't going to be sitting there trying to turn it all into an analog of Christianity or trying to make it a metaphor on Judaism. I'm straight up, this is a fiction just like all the other religions, so let's just write what it says.
I like it. And this sounds like the perfect kind of role-playing game for an atheist.
Well, it's certainly an excellent role-playing game from the point of view of it has a very deep, complex culture. Barker is essentially our Tolkien, and I don't say that in any aggrandized fashion. The man is wildly accomplished, extremely brilliant, and he worked on this world for most of his life, 70 years. So it's a very robust setting in which to have role-playing games.
And he started this, you said, when he was 10 years old.
When he was 10 years old, out in Idaho or Utah. Forgive me, I forget which one. He started, he had an interest in Mayan and Aztec cultures, and he started there, and he lived for several years in Pakistan and Afghanistan. He wrote language guides to Urdu and Pashtun, and married a Pakistani, and then for several years was the professor of South and Southeast Asian Studies at the University of Minnesota and chair of the department.
Now, did I hear you correctly when you said that the book is written in the language?
No, the book's written in English.
Okay.
But the language, and you can go to tecumseh.com. If you go to the book, which I believe they're putting on the screen occasionally on Amazon, you can find links to tecumseh.com, and you can look into this. But he's written several full languages for this world, one of which is Solyani. Words like Mitlanyal and Gardassial and Nanglaru and all these other words are part of a complex and very clear grammar on how the language works.
So I'm wondering, are you fluent in some of these languages?
Okay. No, I know individual nouns, but I am no linguist. So to his great disappointment, I could not conjugate a Solyani word if I had to, but I can pronounce them.
Okay, yeah, so, which is better than I can do.
That's right.
And the 2 volumes, as you said, they are available on Amazon.
Yep.
And I know that they are putting those up as we speak as well occasionally.
And of note, a little interesting side note, drivethrurpg.com, good luck finding it, but that's the name, drivethrurpg.com, we recently posted the original mimeographed rules for Tecumseh from 1974. They're available for $15, so that's a little piece of gaming history that you can pick up by going to drivethrurpg.com. It has a bunch of other Tecumseh stuff there too, but very interesting stuff.
And where's M.A.R. Barker these days?
He is in declining health. He is here in Minneapolis, but he is no longer writing or conducting a game. I was in his role-playing game for about a quarter century.
Okay. Excellent. Well, I know that we have a few minutes left here before we conclude. And I did want to briefly touch on a couple of topics. One other thing I wanted to touch on before I go to that, though, is you had mentioned before we went on air here about your other project that you work in, and that's the Vilification Tennis Comedy Troupe. And I'd like to hear just a little bit about that as well.
It's a very serious scientific endeavor. No, Vilification Tennis are the folks that you see at the Renaissance Festival who stand up on the stage and yell insults at each other. So it's competitive yo mama jokes. It's basically a bunch of white guys doing the dozens. And we're at the Renaissance Festival during the summer. We put on shows monthly at the Bryant Lake Bowl in Minneapolis. Our upcoming show, March 23rd and 24th, is our game show, our annual game show edition, where we make fun of all sorts of different game shows.
I see. So by the time that most of the viewers are watching this, that show will have already passed.
Well, then the show in April is our amateur show, where we have at the present time, 9 people signed up to try to join the Vilification Tennis cast by getting up there and being funny for the first time in front of a live audience. They audition in front of the audience as part of the show. I did it last year. It's extremely stress-inducing and traumatic, and so I urge everyone to get down to the Bryant Lake Bowl and just make fun of these poor bastards because they're going to be trying hard.
Excellent. Does that go on? Is that a recurring thing that happens?
There's a show at the Bryant Lake Bowl every month.
Every month.
Every
month. Okay.
Now, in the summer when Renaissance Festival is going on, then there isn't a show. But so August, September, no show. But otherwise, there's a show.
Okay.
Every month.
And real quick before we do go, we had mentioned at the top of the show that you are featured in these videos.
Yes.
And are these produced then by a member of the church? The
Yes, Larry
Church?
Levercum, a member of First Universalist, produced this video along with a number of other people whose names I don't know, so I apologize for not naming you. But they're videos that are basically married couples, gay, straight, old, young, and we sit down and we talk about what the importance of marriage is to us. So we're not explicitly taking a side in the video, but we are talking about the importance of the married relationship and, you know, why we believe basically it belongs to whoever wants to be part of one.
Are there any future videos, clips on YouTube that you foresee?
Very possibly. I don't know what Larry's plans are, but I know that First Universalist is a strong opponent of the Marriage Prohibition Amendment, and so we're going to be out there fighting until Minnesota is the first state to overturn one of these efforts.
Yeah, and by the time that some of our viewers do watch this, maybe for the first time, the marriage amendment vote will have already happened.
In November?
It could be, yep.
Okay.
These are up
for a while, huh?
For quite some time, indefinitely.
Okay.
So hopefully some people who might be watching this video will have known by now, by the time they watch this, that the voters had rejected that ballot. I'm confident that it's going to be rejected. I think that would put Minnesota as the first state ever to reject that on a ballot measure.
Yep.
So I'm really excited about that happening.
I really hope that's how it turns out.
Bob, is there any other things that we should get to know about you before we conclude? We only have less than a minute left here, and I'm wondering if there's anything else that you'd like to add about yourself, anything that we need to know to get to know better Bob Alberti.
No, I make quite the noise on my own. You can visit my Twitter page or look me up on Facebook. I have no shortage of personality, I guess.
Okay.
But I think what's important to point out is that atheists get one of the worst raps available. You've got, you know, the University of Minnesota study that said atheists are the most mistrusted people.
Yep, that's right.
And what I say to people who...
I'm sorry, Bob, I have to cut you off. We are all done.
Okay.
I just want to let everybody know to access our newsletter, visit us on our website, get to know us, and request a newsletter. And if you're interested in us, we are interested in you. Thank you, Bob, for joining us.
Thank you.